Alright, let's do this. The iQOO 15R or the OnePlus 15R. Which one of these two phones should you actually buy? Because on paper, they have very similar hardware specs, and therefore picking one phone can get confusing. You get the same Snapdragon 8 Gen 5 with LPDDR5X RAM type and UFS 4.1 storage. You get similar display specs. You get similar sized silicon carbon batteries with similar charging speeds too. And you've got the same dual camera setup on the rear and a single selfie camera on the front. Now, while the hardware specs are similar, there are definitely some key differences that I want to highlight so that your purchase decision becomes easier. Alright, what are we waiting for? Let's begin this very important battle of the budget flagships under 50,000 rupees. Let's go. If you're watching me for the first time, I'm Esha. This is Trakin Tech English, your destination for detailed, incisive gadget reviews. Now I'm going to start by comparing the performance on both these phones directly because that's what matters, because what you get is the same hardware. Snapdragon 8 Gen 5, LPDDR5X RAM type and UFS 4.1 storage. But what's different is the tuning. Now let's start with the benchmarks which I ran at highest performance on both the phones. Now Android version 11 scores are within touching distance of each other, but Geekbench scores are higher on OnePlus. Now moving on to the GPU tests, in 3D Mark Steel Nomad, average FPS are nearly identical. So are the SolarBay ray tracing numbers. The storage read-write speeds are largely similar too. Even the CPU throttle test reveals that the CPU stability is again largely similar on both the phones. But the first real difference that we see is in the 3D Mark Wildlife Extreme test that stress tests the GPU. Now you will see that both have very similar best loop scores and highest FPS. But OnePlus achieves this without throttling too much but pushing the temperatures. And iQOO achieves this by throttling but keeping the temp well under 40 degrees. Now this is the first real performance difference that I noticed. Now moving on to real world gaming, we actually tested two games. Firstly, it's of course Genshin Impact, and the second one is a new addition, and that's Arknight's Endfield. By the way, congratulations to the folks who are shown up on the screen right now for guessing the game correctly. Now to really be a part of the Trakin Tech English community, you have to hit the subscribe button. Go ahead. Do that. Give us your support. Alright, now moving on, in Genshin Impact, both the phones have support for game frame interpolation. However, iQOO has a clear advantage as it can push the 60 FPS native output to 144 FPS, while OnePlus is limited to 120 FPS. After half an hour of gameplay, OnePlus averaged around a perfect 120 FPS, which was very surprising and a clear improvement from the last time we tested it. The iQOO, on the other hand, pushed the numbers north of 140 FPS while running cooler than OnePlus by almost a degree. Now, purists will be like game frame interpolation means there'll be artifacting and there'll be motion judder, none of which I spotted while playing Genshin Impact on both these phones, which is awesome. Now, in Arknight's Endfield as well, the iQOO's average FPS was higher than OnePlus, but this time it ran slightly hotter than OnePlus by a degree. So in conclusion, benchmark numbers are largely similar on both, but iQOO seems to have an edge in real-world gaming performance, at least in the two games that we tested. And moreover, iQOO doesn't just offer game frame interpolation, it also offers game super resolution, which means that you can play a game like Genshin at 1.5K default resolution of the screen. And even when you're playing at 1.5K resolution, you can use game frame interpolation to actually bump up the FPS from 30 to 60. So iQOO is doing a lot of cool things with the Q3 supercomputing chip. Now let's move on to the second battle, the cameras. Now you get the same dual camera setup on both the phones. With the OnePlus 15R, what you get is the Sony IMX90650MP sensor and an 8 megapixel ultra wide. On the iQOO, what you get is the Sony LYT700V sensor with an 8 megapixel ultra wide, and both are 1x1.56 inch sensors, the primary sensors. And the selfie shooter on both is a 32 megapixel unit. Now you know this, I know this, the specs might be similar, but the tuning is very different. But now when it comes to detailed retrieval, both the phones do not show too many differences considering the fact that you get the same 1x1.56 inch sensor. But when it comes to the sharpness of the textures, iQOO seems like it's doing slightly better because it's slightly over sharpened, but I think it's done tastefully. I kind of like it. I kind of like iQOO better. However, you do not get the same performance in low light because the overprocessing means that it smoothens out the detail and the noise more than OnePlus does. As for HDR, iQOO has slightly better shadow control than OnePlus, and shooting people against a harsh background, both are almost equally good, I'd say. Now, skin tones are also more accurate and consistent on OnePlus. The reds are definitely more pronounced, but the overall result is closer to Parikshit's actual skin tone. iQOO is slightly creamish and brightened here. Now, portraits are reliable on both, but when you pixel peep, you will notice that OnePlus picks up much more detail than iQOO, like you can see in this 100% crop. It also has a better edge cutout. Plus, you get one extra focal length as well. And now when it comes to zooming, I mean, both the phones don't have a telephoto camera, so you will have to rely on digital crops. But when you take a look at the digital crops, OnePlus seems to be doing it better than iQOO. Now the ultra-wide-angle cameras are average in general. However, I feel like OnePlus has a bit of a lead because it does low light slightly better than iQOO does. Now selfies from OnePlus are more detailed and the skin tones are also better here. iQOO here made Satwik's face look like he was actually blushing. Now in low light selfies, both tend to aggressively smoothen out the details on the face. OnePlus is slightly better but not by much. But again, because of the skin tones, I prefer OnePlus here. Now video recording is where the gap becomes very, very clear. OnePlus can record at 4K 120 FPS with stronger stabilization and wider dynamic range both in daylight and in low light. In comparison, iQOO is limited to 4K 60 FPS, and in general, I prefer the videos from OnePlus across all the cameras and in different lighting conditions. iQOO does have one advantage: it can shoot 4K 60 FPS selfie video, while OnePlus is restricted to 4K 30 FPS. But apart from that, I feel like OnePlus's video quality in general is better than iQOO's. So overall, in terms of camera performance, I would say that OnePlus has a slight lead over iQOO, which is something very surprising because I expected iQOO to have the lead. Now design-wise, both these phones are like most modern 2026 phones. You get a flat side and a flat back, and it's your typical glass sandwich candy bar design. And of course, on iQOO, you've got that squircle camera module, and with OnePlus, what you get is a squirt angle. But what I like about the iQOO 15R, which I also mentioned in the first impressions, is it's a more fun, playful design. I really like this checkerbox pattern that is running on the back and the fact that the camera module looks like mini robot eyes. And the 15R in comparison is more minimal, but I do like this color a lot. Now in terms of materials, both offer glass back and fiber back variants with an aluminum frame. OnePlus uses Corning Gorilla Glass 7i on the front, and iQOO gets Shot Sensation Alpha protection. Now durability wise, it's excellent on both. OnePlus has IP66, IP68, IP69 and IP69K ratings, while iQOO offers IP68 and IP69. Therefore, OnePlus has a bit of an edge here. Now, both the phones also have an IR blaster, and both are unfortunately stuck at USB 2.0 speeds from their Type-C ports, and this is not a good look for gaming phones. What are you doing, brands? Just upgrade to USB Type-C 3.2. Now, OnePlus does have one extra functional advantage, the plus key, which apart from being set by default to open mind space, can be mapped to different actions if you want. Now, design is subjective, but OnePlus does have an extra hardware key and a slightly better IP rating too. While iQOO in comparison is smaller, it's lighter, it's more compact, has a larger battery, and has a more fun design as well. Alright, now talking about displays, OnePlus has a large 6.83-inch LTPS AMOLED panel with a peak of 165Hz refresh rate. In comparison, the iQOO 15R has a much smaller and more compact 6.59-inch 1.5K resolution OLED panel with LTPS technology and 144Hz refresh rate at the peak. Now you should know that the 144Hz refresh rate on the iQOO and 165Hz on OnePlus is going to be only for certain supported apps and games. But the system UI on both runs at 60, 90 or 120Hz depending on whatever content is playing on the screen. Now when using outdoors, we felt like both the displays were fairly readable. However, when viewing HDR content on both Netflix and YouTube, we noticed that in certain scenes, the HDR performance of the iQOO 15R is better than OnePlus. The peaks in the highlights are slightly better on iQOO compared to OnePlus. However, when you switch to the Gallery app to look at HDR content, then OnePlus has a slight advantage because this is where I think OnePlus hits that peak of 3600 nits. But you'll notice this only when you're nitpicking. See what I did there? Now color tuning is very different on both. iQOO actually goes for a more accurate and controlled color profile. OnePlus is slightly more vibrant, even in the Pro mode. Now moving on, both have ultrasonic in-display fingerprint scanners that are fast and reliable, and the haptic feedback tuning is good on both the phones, but iQOO has slightly better, localized haptic feedback tuning in my opinion. Now moving on to the audio support, you get LHDC and LDAC support on both, which is nice, but the speakers definitely sound better on OnePlus. Take a listen to it for yourself. So overall, I'd say that the display experience is slightly better on the iQOO 15R, whereas the audio experience is slightly better on the OnePlus 15R. Alright, now coming to batteries, both these phones have massive silicon carbon batteries, from 3000 mAh to 4000 mAh to 5000 mAh, now 7000, 7500 mAh becoming the norm. Wow, we've moved really far ahead in terms of battery technology, despite whatever Apple, Google and Samsung have in mind. Anyway, with the OnePlus 15R, what you get is a 7400 mAh unit. Now with iQOO, we have a 7600 mAh unit inside, and it easily beats OnePlus in terms of battery longevity. Even the charging is slightly faster on iQOO compared to OnePlus. You get 100-watt charging speeds on iQOO, 80-watt on OnePlus. So OnePlus takes about 55 minutes for a full charge and iQOO will do it in 10 minutes less. Connectivity is excellent on both. You get support for multiple 5G bands, you get Wi-Fi 7, you get Bluetooth 6, you get NFC, all of that's there. Alright, now about the software. Now what you get with OnePlus is OxygenOS 16 based on Android 16, and you will also get support for 4 + 6 years of Android updates. Now with iQOO, what you get is OS 6 based on Android 16, and iQOO's also promising 4 + 6 years of updates. Now if you have watched my reviews before, I do have a preference for OxygenOS over OriginOS. Now don't get me wrong, I do like OriginOS and it's a good upgrade over FunTouch OS, and there are some features I like too. For example, the Origin Island is a nice integration, you get deep customization options, the animations are fairly smooth, and you get a fairly cohesive UI compared to FunTouch OS. But OxygenOS still feels more refined, cleaner and more fluid with minimal bloat, better lock screen customization, scalable icons, and of course the better AI experience with the PlusMind ecosystem. Of course, you get Circle to Search and Gemini on both, but PlusMind sort of elevates that AI experience. So yeah, for premium software experience, I would go with OnePlus. Okay, now we're at the end of the video and let's take a look at the pricing. And if you look at it, the same 12 to 56 GB variant of both these phones, iQOO is about 2,000 rupees cheaper than OnePlus, which makes it more value for money. However, let me break this down for you. The OnePlus 15 has a better camera tuning overall, better speakers, and you get a superior software experience. iQOO 15 in comparison has a better tuned display, a better tuned overall gaming performance, and slightly better battery life too. But you know what? When you compare all of these aspects between both these phones, the differences are extremely tiny, so much so that we can actually mark it down to margin of error. And therefore, I'm finding it very difficult to actually pick a winner. And in this scenario, your personal preference will matter a lot. And therefore, I'd love to know, based on whatever factual information that I've presented to you, which one of these two phones do you think is the better buy under 50,000 rupees? I'm sure you'll also find it tough to tell me one phone's name. Alright, that's it from me for this one. I'll see you guys in the next comparison. Until then, keep tracking and stay safe.